Telecommunication engineers are professionals who manage data over different modes of communications. They perform a range of duties related to the design and installation of telecommunications equipment. They install new hardware and software for telecommunication systems, test the same to determine efficiency and compatibility with existing systems, and ensure timely planning and implementation of various projects. Before we get to any of the planning and implementation, someone had to build a system in the first place. Young professional men are responsible for the building of the Aliv network and, of course, its upgrade and maintenance. Cable Bahamas, as you are aware, is the parent company of Aliv and Rev, and sometimes we just have to take the time out to showcase our own bright minds. We grab our cell phones and use them at will, but do we ever stop to think just who makes them accessible to us every hour, every day? More than likely, the answer to that question is no. Well, tonight, we are going to meet two of the bright minds behind the Aliv network. Our guests are telecommunication engineers, Ricardo Cooper and Michael Trico, who worked on the Aliv platform that thousands of Bahamians use. Our topic is Aliv, the art of engineering. You're watching On the Record. I'm Candino Knowles, filling in for your host, Jerome Sawyer. See you on the other side of the break.
Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits. Venture into unknown territory. We take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV Cable Channel 212 and streaming live on Facebook on the R News Bahamas page.
The Aliv network as we discuss Aliv, the art of engineering. And as said, our guests are Aliv engineers Ricardo Cooper and Michael Trico. Gentlemen, welcome to On the Record.
Hi.
All right, Ricardo, we'll start with you. Briefly, give me a little background on yourself as an engineer.
So for myself, I got an electrical engineering technology degree at the University of the Bahamas. I started at Aliv a couple of years ago as the radio access network engineer and transport engineer, and slowly worked my way up to being a lead I worked my way up to being the lead radio access network and transport engineer.
All right, and Michael, same?
Same. Went to high school, St. John's. Did COB, did my bachelor's in electrical engineering tech. Also went to USF, had the time to attempt my master's in electrical engineering. But when the opportunity opened up at Aliv, I figured experience would have been more important. So started there in the graduate engineering program as a graduate core engineer, and then worked my way up as the lead core network engineer.
All right, so who was the brainchild of Aliv, and how were both of you involved in putting it together? We'll start with you. Yeah.
I am not exactly sure who was the brainchild behind it, but the first people we met were Stephen Karan and Damian Blackburn. We had our interviews with them, and it started from there.
Yeah. How were you involved?
So we came in after the initial, after the licenses were granted to CBL and the government in that split, where they started off by building a network. Then, the requirements became that we needed local talent. Yeah. So they came up with which is very innovative, that the graduate program, where they trained a lot of young people with degrees in engineering or who had the interest, in order for us to be able to learn while the network was being built. So we did partnerships with companies like SaskTel and learning from them in order for us to be trained as we built it. So what we did was, I know Ricardo's specialty is the radio access engineer. So he mainly deals with going out, ensuring the towers were built effectively, making sure that we did surveys to make sure we could do the most coverage for everyone. So I think that's where we were at. Now I think we're at 242, which was a neat number of towers that we had.
All right.
But I think now we're at like 243 or 244.
Yeah.
Which kind of ruins that nice, neat number.
Yeah. Well, Ricardo, tell us a little bit more about that process. Radio access. What exactly does that mean, and what was that like? Especially having to build something new, and now to hear how many towers, it's 243. That's a lot. Tell us a little bit more about that.
To be honest, it was a task. When I first came in, they got me some training, tell me what they wanted to do, and then immediately I went straight out to the field.
Yeah.
Straight to Eleuthera and started out there programming switches to install in the new cell towers there. Long story short, the cell towers had to be installed where the people were. So we went from settlement to settlement, turning up each and every cell tower, testing the service, then moving to the next one, then to the next one, then to the next one. Started in Eleuthera, Andros, Long Island, Crooked Island, Acklands, Rumkey, Mayaguana, Inagua, Abaco, just going all over.
I'm just curious, did you ever imagine that this is what you'd be doing?
No.
Or that you would even be involved in this kind of effort?
Not in the slightest.
Yeah? You?
Definitely not. Communications was definitely not my favorite form of engineering.
Yeah.
So to be here now and heavily involved in communications is kind of astounding to see where you came from and where you are now. And especially now that we can boast the one of the only 4.5 G networks in the region, as well as we have the only, I think, VoLTE network, which is voice over LTE in the region. So we're definitely being a part of history within the Caribbean itself. So I think that's a wonderful impact that we can make.
Has that changed for you? I know you said, communications wasn't necessarily the part of engineering that you wanted to be involved with initially, but has that changed since you've been with Aliv? It's a question for both of you.
Yeah, it definitely
yes,
has.
Definitely.
Yeah. How so?
Because what happened is, like I said, I remember he told my interview, when you interview with Stephen Karan, who is the group CTO now. At the time, he was a Aliv CTO. And you meet someone that's so passionate about communications, and you're not even in an interview anymore. You're now just talking about, hey, what do you think about the service? What do you think about this? What do you think about technology and the scape of where it's going? And then when you become a part of that and around people that are so enamored with technology, you end up finding a passion for it. So now it's such a thing that now when we see things like 5G, we want to be the first people to have 5G. We want to be able to say we want this feature, that feature, so that way when we go there in the general public, that everyone is able to say, hey, we have Aliv, we have this, we're on par with the T-Mobiles, the AT&Ts and all that. So there's no difference than the service you get here than when you go to, let's say, the US or Europe or anywhere else. Mm-hmm. So I think that really changes your mindset in things.
And you mentioned just now 5G. It's been a very controversial topic. What are your thoughts on that, on 5G?
I think 5G is a great new technological advancement. I recently completed some training on 5G. So it's not what everyone thinks it is. It will help to provide a lot more data akin to what you would get from a fiber optic network, but you'll be able to access it on your phone. So imagine where you would have Wi-Fi and you can only get 30 to 40 megabits per second on your phone. Now you can get gigabits of data to your phone. The best way to describe it is, imagine going from trying to download your favorite TV show and taking 2 to 3 hours to you being able to download it in a few seconds.
Wow, so that's lightning fast, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, and was that something that, getting training in that, was that something that was important to you?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah? How so?
Okay, so for the cellular network, for the radio access network, we have multiple iterations. We have 3G, 4G, and 5G. For each iteration, we have to do training on it to figure out how it works, how we can make it better, how we can tweak it or optimize it so that the users can get the best experience possible. So a main part of my job is if a user has a complaint about slow speeds, we monitor each and every cell tower, we monitor each and every antenna. We figure out what can we do to make the service just that little bit better at each and every cell tower across the entire Bahamas.
All right, so when the plan for the Aliv network came about, besides your university training, did you get some direct training on telecommunications systems, especially since that wasn't necessarily where you were?
Yes, when we first came in, we did an intensive set of training from Huawei across all of the systems they have and how to use them, how to work them, how to do maintenance on them, how to optimize them, and then how do we use all of that in day-to-day operations to make the network a little bit better.
As well as I mentioned earlier, the partnership with Sastel, where this is a company from Canada that has had experience in creating a telecom network and running it for long periods of time. So when we got there, they were able to essentially partner us up with experts in that field already. So we got the best of both worlds. We got the Huawei training, which was essentially on the equipment and the towers themselves, whereas we also got the operational side of it from the people from Zastel, where they had years of experience. They were able to walk us through and the good thing about it is, by walking us through it, they also were able to walk us through certain intricate things that only come with experience. Like you could read a textbook and it won't prepare you for everything. Yeah. Because sometimes you can say, hey, sometimes maybe a PC electrical tape may be needed instead of buying a whole new thing. Yeah. So I think that experience was very helpful.
Well, tell me something. Now that you've gotten that experience, what were some of the challenges that you faced? I mean, building a network like this, like Aliv's network, it's a mammoth task, and I'm certain there were challenges. What were the biggest challenges for you all?
The biggest challenges we had were the deadlines.
Meeting those targets, right?
Yes, meeting those targets.
Especially when the market is waiting for this to come, right?
Yes. Yeah. A lot of times it required us to work long hours, be on different islands, and just to work a lot, just to get everything ready in time. And I think we beat the deadline by about 2 days, just enough time to have a small celebration of a clap.
Look at that! Yeah. Look at that!
Also, I think expectations as well, because when you bring something new to the market, and with comparison to the other guys, there's a certain amount of expectations where people love to stay where they're comfortable. So you have to be able to bring such a great experience where they take a chance on you. So we had to be able to kind of weather that, as well as even environmental factors, right? So because it's a new network, things like hurricane, we had to make sure that everything was hurricane tested, and we got tested with I think Matthew. We also got tested with Dorian as well, where we had to make sure we had those things in place, so that way we could say that we're battle tested in that side of it.
Yeah, and you must feel accomplished now, at least being able to look back at how far you've come. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. What would you say is the most the thing that you're most happy and excited about working with this network still?
I would say it was our ability to pull together and do the restoration for Dorian. After the storm hit, we all lost communications to all of our loved ones there, and the ability of all of us to pull together, team up, and get it done to get the cell towers back on air, so people can call their loved ones, call for help, and do what they need to do to get back to regular life.
Yeah. We're going to talk more about that, but we are going to take a quick break here and be back with more On the Record on the other side of this break.
Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits. Venture into unknown territory. We take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV Cable Channel 212 and streaming live on Facebook on the R News Bahamas page.
And we're back with more On the Record. We are discussing Aliv, the art of engineering, with Aliv engineers Ricardo Cooper and Michael Trico. We were talking about your continuation with the Aliv network as engineers, and you have been a part of this journey from the very beginning, right? So what I'm curious to know, and perhaps the viewers out there, especially as you've shared about your experience, what is a day in the life like? Tell us about what it's like working on the system on any given day.
So we'd start off the day with doing our daily reports, doing our checks from what happened on the day prior. So we check the cell towers, we check the stats to see if we had any drops in speeds, any drops in any data links to any of the sites, and to see if there's any issues with congestion where they might have any service issues on the network. From there, we'd go into working on how we can make service a little bit better, which can be a daily task or can work all the way to the end of the month to see what we can do to make service just that much better and future planning.
Yeah, and so what that does is obviously help also to address any customer issues or
Yes.
challenges that may be happening. You get ahead of that by having that report from the night before.
And even just getting emails from the customer care team that they might have experienced overnight, so that we can launch investigations into those, as well as kind of doing testing ourselves. So we'll find, for instance, if a customer says they have low data speeds in an area or there's poor coverage in an area, we'll take those rides out ourselves, do that testing ourselves, make those test calls ourselves to make sure that we keep every customer, every complaint, whether you complain to say, hey, I don't like the font on my phone, we make sure we check those. So I think it is a way to keep us one step ahead, to ensure that we're getting everything correct.
Yeah, so you guys are helping the team know before the customers call even that there's a challenge, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So if there's some type of alarms or KPIs, which is our key performance indicators. So we have a daily report on those, like Ricardo said. We also have weekly, monthly reports. So if we see a site that says, hey, this site is now below a certain speed that we're not comfortable with, we're now going out there, we're now in meetings to figure out exactly, hey, we need to add more sectors here, maybe add a different site in order for us to make the overall customer experience better. Even in terms of that, once we do that, then we are better to future plan. So we can say, okay, well, we're noticing that we need more capacity here, so we're now saying we're gonna put an extra tower here to make sure that the customers that might have said, hey, it's really slow in Carmichael Road, because we're now adding extra towers, is now going to be more speed for everyone. So we do that on a daily basis, sometimes deep into the nights, early morning hours, things
I'm
like
sure,
that.
especially when you've got customers calling and
Exactly,
saying
yes.
that, you know what, this system is not obviously working as efficiently
Yes.
as I would hope, right? I mean, but even talking about issues, Aliv is known to have very few. And the public has openly attested to that, and
Yeah.
obviously that's thanks to work from you guys and other members of your team. But without spilling any company secrets, is this because of the way that the network was put together? Especially as you talked about through your position in radio access, positioning towers strategically across islands.
Yes. So we try to keep the cell towers where the users won't be able to notice them, but try to keep them close to the users. So everyone wants to have great service, but no one wants to see a cell tower. So it's kind of like they have to be strategically placed and hidden, but close enough to where everyone is, so that they have access to the best service possible. For instance, in the Palmdale area, we have several cell sites in that area, but I bet you no one can tell you that they have seen them, unless if you were to drive into the Dundas.
I haven't seen them, so yeah.
So we have one in the Dundas parking lot. If you'd see that one there, you have one in the Kill Bahamas parking lot. And so unless they're in wide open spaces, people tend to not really notice them.
And in some areas where we also do hidden ones. So you might, if it'll probably be a good trick that if you're looking around, you see a giant pineapple in the sky, or a giant palm tree that you say, hey, this might not look like a regular palm tree. It may be a cell tower.
All right. And how did you, I guess, come up with that? With say, trying to disguise it? Or
So in some cases, like Ricardo was saying, some of our customers, They want service, they love service, but it's aesthetically not pleasing to them. So they don't want to look at a giant steel tower all day.
Right.
So it's inventive that we had to look up to say, hey, how can we best give you the best coverage? Because sometimes we can't move it. This might be the best spot for you to get the maximum service. We're not going to move it further away from you because it's not going to help you use your phone any better. So at that point, we then have to look for ways to hide these. Now, whether it be through a mini tower that just looks like a little Wi-Fi router in your house, not in your house, sorry, in the business,
Yeah.
or something that looks like a pineapple outside or a palm tree outside, then we have to go with that in order to make sure that we're kind of getting the best of both worlds. You're
Right.
getting the coverage, but you're also not looking at something that's just a steel pipe.
So it's thinking about the customer beyond just
Yes.
their actual cell phone or
Exactly.
mobile experience, right? All right, technology is always moving. And since its existence, how many major upgrades have there been to the Aliv network?
We've had quite a few. So we've had network upgrades for both the radio access network and the core network. I think we just recently finished one a couple of months ago, getting to the next firmware version or software version, and we try to keep it update as frequently as possible so that all the new features that are coming through, we have access to them. The users can have access to them. So one of the features we have is called carrier aggregation. Long story short, LTE has multiple frequencies. Your phone shows up a little LTE plus in the corner, and your speeds just shoot up because now instead of having access to one frequency, you can now get 2 or sometimes 3 or 4.
So that's why I called it a 4.5G
Okay.
network. So,
All right, now that makes sense.
yeah, so what that is essentially, when we first started, I think we were having just a pure LTE network. So you would have speeds up to, I think, about 80 to 100 megabytes per second. Once we started adding the carrier aggregation, you would now get up to 150, sometimes 200. But if you look at your phone, if you have a Samsung, it'll show LTE plus. Sometimes I think on an iPhone, it'll probably show the same. So when you see a little LTE plus signal, that's carrier aggregation. So it's using multiple bands at the same time in order to give you faster speeds. And in terms of the upgrades, we also did service upgrades. So we did different services since we've only been in existence about 5 years. We have implemented the voice over LTE. So if you had made a call before, you'd notice your phone would drop from LTE to probably 3G, or it'd have an 8 symbol. Now you would notice it'll stay on LTE. So if you want to use data while you're using your Bluetooth headphones or something like that, you can stay on LTE the whole time. It gives you better voice quality. We've implemented things like HD voice, so that way we've improved it. So we're continuously just upgrading and ensuring that the service is great and we're on par with the global companies as well. So that's what we're always doing. So we're continuously, every year, if we see something that's a mess, we add it, we correct it, we implement it.
Yeah. And I wanted to just have a clarification, and not just for me, but for the viewer as well. You said about being able to get this 4G, or as you described it, 4G and a half.
Yeah.
Do you have to have a particular device? I know you mentioned the iPhone, but is that the only device, and what versions of these devices would one need to, say, access that 4G and a half?
So most of the Samsungs and the iPhones use them. Alcatels use them as well. But we ensure that when we procure devices, that we have support for using multiple bands at the same time. So it might not be all the same bands, but there will be more than one. So usually most devices that you may have bought directly from Aliv will support that. So that's why I mentioned that if you look at your Samsung, you'll see the little LTE plus. Apple sometimes will do the LTE plus, sometimes they don't. But you'll notice it in terms of probably over time.
Yeah.
So it's something where you might have said 5 months ago you had slower speeds, and now you're realizing in the same spot you have faster speeds. So that's what that was. It was just that it's technology that places like T-Mobile and AT&T have implemented a few years back. But because we are a new fledgling company, we're trying to keep up with everyone else. Yeah. So that's why we're able to implement it in such a short period of time.
And what areas will a customer experience that kind of service?
It's implemented on all of our towers.
Okay, all right.
All of them. So all of them have that ability.
Wow.
So unless it's congested with persons at the same time, so we have to make sure that everyone gets a fair shot. So unless it's super crowded, that's when you'll notice that your speeds may slow down. But it's on every tower in our network.
So besides carrier aggregation, what other upgrades or features as a result of the many major upgrades that have been made that customers now have access to?
So a few of the extra features we have are, we have features to improve the regular voice quality on 3G. We have features to help improve the voice quality a little bit further on VoLTE. We have features to improve the speeds, the individual speeds at each individual tower, and also a feature to try to prolong battery life.
Oh, wow. And that's a big thing for iPhone users in particular.
Yes.
I'm one of them that has to make sure my phone is charged every night. Otherwise, I'm mid-morning and my phone's dying. All right, so that's good to know. So, ultimately, these are things that customers are able to access but may not necessarily be aware of. Where can they find this information?
Usually, when we first launched a lot of these products, we went and we released them online and at the stores. Even you could find a lot of information on the Facebook page. So usually they're at the original launch. We don't continuously do it because, like I said, by this time it would have been launched. A lot of these features would have been launched about a year and a half ago, so probably late 2018, early 2019.
All right.
And now with the pandemic, there wasn't much availability to advertise in the stores because everyone was at home. So
right. Well, I mean, a lot of customers have heard it here now. So
exactly.
They now know that for the last year they've been able to actually access these kind of features, and we'll talk more about that. We are discussing Aliv, the art of engineering, with Aliv engineers Ricardo Cooper and Michael Trico. We are going to pause here for a moment for another commercial break and return with more On the Record. Stay tuned.
Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits. Venture into unknown territory. We take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV Cable Channel 212 and streaming live on Facebook on the R News Bahamas page.
Welcome back to On the Record. We are now in the second half of the show, and we are discussing Aliv, the art of engineering, with our guests, Aliv engineers Ricardo Cooper and Michael Trico. Ricardo, Michael, just before the break, while we were talking about networks across the world, we talked about AT&T, we talked about T-Mobile, Verizon. In terms of system capacity, would you say Aliv is on par with these networks?
In my opinion, yes. We don't have a problem with providing enough capacity for all the users. We're just trying to make sure that we have more than enough so when the users congregate for like a special event or day-to-day traffic, that they can all have a very enjoyable level of service.
What would you say makes it world-class?
It would be the speeds we provide and the resilience. So let's say if a cell tower goes down for a power outage, we have backup generators, we have batteries, and we have other cell towers that can also feed into the area to provide service for any given area. And
we saw that during Hurricane Dorian, right? You talked about that earlier.
Yeah, exactly. We have all of those features in place for hurricanes. We make sure that every hurricane that comes, when there's a warning, persons like myself, Ricardo, our managers would create a command center. So we're all hands on deck 24/7. We're looking at KPIs consistently. For instance, during Dorian's time, it was amazing to see the destruction through just alarms, because you would know what happened to a site because the alarm would be a water alarm, so you would know the site was flooding. So you could see it real time as it goes out, and we're there making preparations on how to replace it, trying to get equipment in order so that way once the all clear is given, we're out and rebuilding at the same time. We also do have, I know Ricardo was mentioning the for events and congregations. So what we do, similar to hurricanes, is that we also have things called cell on wheels. So these are mobile cell sites where they don't require physical cement blocks or anything like that. They just go, they're set up, and for emergencies or if we're having a large concert where we might not have capacity, then we just roll it out for that time and put it up, and you have cell signal and extra capacity for those times. But we also try to ensure that they're ready to go for when we do have a disaster that may be impending. They're close, they're ready, just all they have to do is hit the boat, and by tomorrow the cell service is back up.
Yeah, and obviously that, again, keeping the customer top of mind.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a major difference between us and a lot of other networks, is that customer experience is definitely first on our list. We go out there, we take everything a customer says very seriously. We would get even discussions from, and that's from the top down. So you'd be in, if you see Franklin out and Franklin met someone with an issue, or Damien met someone with an issue, they'll text you right then and there, hey, I'm at such and such and this person is having a bad time, could you please take a look at it? So so an engineer's job is definitely 24/7. So we're just there, we're looking into it right away.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like with most of our senior management, where you can see anyone anywhere and everyone takes that responsibility for the network. Mm-hmm. So even someone in customer care, if someone says, oh, hey, I'm having an issue with the top up today, then you're calling someone on the phone and say, hey, this person's having an issue, and you might not know that person directly or anything like that, but just to make sure that the brand and that the experience is top notch. That's some of the things that we do. And I know you asked earlier if we consider it world class. Definitely, because if you look at it, the way I measure it is like this. If I travel to the US tomorrow and use a T-Mobile SIM, is the experience that much of a difference than when you were back home? And if we're on par or greater than those, then I think we're doing a great job.
Yeah, and those networks have their own challenges, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Are you ever able to turn it off, though? You just talked about the fact that you get that text from the CEO, right? And this is happening in this area. I mean, I'm sure you are having the same challenges sometimes. We all live in this community, so we're all on the same network. When you experience issues, are you thinking the same way? Are you looking at that and saying, oh, wait, there's something?
So I think we
go and deal
I think
with
we
that.
definitely look at it from a doctor's point of view.
Right.
So if we're somewhere and a call drops, then the first thing we do is look it up ourselves,
Yeah.
kind of self-diagnose. And then
Right,
if it's
so it's
something
never,
that
you can never turn it off.
you can never
then.
turn it off. And
Yeah.
and that's the thing. Once you see something from a certain point of view, you always see it that way.
You can't unsee it.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Is
when-
it the same with you? Are you constantly
Yep.
going through the same in your phone and experiencing
Yep.
issues and saying, you know what, maybe there's a problem here, let me go and figure it out?
If there's ever a drop call, or you notice the speed suddenly dips down for whatever reasons like this, you always want to go check it out to find out what happened. Just to self-diagnose and figure out what it is, because if you're seeing it, chances are the customers are seeing it as well. Mm-hmm. And if you're seeing it now, chances are the other customers have already seen it, have already been suffering from it. You need to be fixed as soon as possible to bring a resolution.
Well, at least Aliv customers know their engineers are actually experiencing
Yeah.
some of the same things and are able to go ahead and get it
Yeah.
fixed and sorted out, right? What processes do you follow to catch the slightest mistakes in your work?
So we have a SDM process. So everything we do, there's what's called a MOP, which is a method of procedure. So before we change anything on the network or get approvals to change anything, we have to basically line it out in our MOP. So what it says is what we're doing, when we're doing it, why we're doing it, the exact commands we plan to use to change.
And MOP stands for?
MOP is method of procedure.
Yes.
So when we do that, it's like a 5-6 page document. This is the conference that we'll be having while we're doing this. These are the steps we're going to take. So if I'm changing something on the network tonight, well, I can't change anything tonight, but it's usually a timeout. So we pre-plan. So if I have a planned occurrence next week, I have to then go create this MOP. I have to say, I'm going to enter command. I'm going to check the alarms, into commands, check the alarms again, test it. If anything's wrong, be prepared to take it right back, roll it back out, and put it back normal. And we have to put those commands in this method of procedure. Then it goes to our SDM process, which goes through approvals from our our
Management,
NOC management, which is the
back
Network
office.
Operations Center, as well as management, senior management. So it goes through 3 levels of management. So they always tell us, hey, if you have a plan, prepare for at least 5 days out for you to get all those approvals and check it. And even afterwards, we make sure we run through all of the tests afterwards. So if I change the most minor thing today, I'm making phone calls, I'm calling voicemail, I'm calling to other networks, we're calling internationally to make sure there's nothing that could go wrong. Now, if something does indeed go wrong that may not have been caught during that testing time, then because we have that rollback capacity, we can roll it back in a matter of minutes.
Yeah. All right, so how do you stay current with the latest technology? And we were discussing 5G for quite a bit during the break. How do you stay current? And you mentioned some latest developments in the international market.
Yeah.
So obviously you're staying current. How?
So what happens is, like I was mentioning earlier, is that because everyone's so passionate about technology, right? And I don't think you get into this field, well, you shouldn't get into this field without a passion. I think we're always looking into the next greatest and best. We always want more. We always want better. So because of that, we're always looking at, besides just the training Ricardo mentioned, we're always looking at Google, we're looking at Wired magazine, we're looking at different scopes to make sure that everything. We're also reading white papers from the GSMA, which is the organization that kind of creates these policies for 5G. 5G is coming. We go to conferences like the GSMA conference, which is where companies like Sprint, AT&T, globally they get together and they speak about the changes in these new documents. So when 5G comes about, they were discussing 5Gs about 3-4 years ago to China, kind of get those policies. So because we're trying to stay up to date and try to be as a global leader, we want to make sure that we're always invested in investigating in this. So even when last week Samsung had the S22 unveiling, we were watching it just to make sure that we know what's coming, what it is, everything like that. So we're always abreast of everything.
Yeah, so Ricardo, what would you say was the biggest network challenge you've ever had, and how did you deal with it?
The biggest network challenge, I would say that would have had to been dealing with Dorian. So as Trico mentioned, we were all in the command center looking at the alarms, seeing the sites getting waterlog issues, sites shutting down for various different reasons, smoke alarms. So we're like planning out how we're going to get there. And and as we were approaching it, when I went there to do the surveys, I expected to see, okay, some mild damage, because our cabinets have survived hurricanes before. And when you get there, there's a car on top of the cabinet and it's halfway underwater. I'm like, yeah, that's not fixable. We're gonna have to replace it all. And just trying to figure out what we need to do to get the network back up and operational so people can resume their normal, regular lives.
Yeah. How did you deal with that, though? I mean, you're able to identify what the issue was, how are you dealing with that as the engineer that you are?
That was tough, because then you start to think, aside from the equipment, how are the people doing down there? Because they went through all of that. They went through all of that, this life-changing event. Homes are gone, lampposts are gone, stores are gone. It kind of imbues in you a sense of duty, like we have to do whatever it takes
to keep customers connected.
Right, to keep them connected to their family and to try to bring them back to a regular way of life.
Yeah. All right, we are going to take a break here. We are discussing Aliv, the art of engineering. Our guests are Aliv engineers Ricardo Cooper and Michael Trico. We return with more on the other side of the break.
Every new season of On the Record, we push the limits. Venture into unknown territory. We take our cameras into places unseen before. We share the stories and experiences that affect us all. And now it's time for Season 5. On the Record, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on RTV Cable Channel 212 and streaming live on Facebook on the R News Bahamas page.
Welcome back. Our guests are Aliv engineers Ricardo Cooper and Michael Trico. We are discussing Aliv, the art of engineering. Gentlemen, what would you say is the most outstanding thing about the Aliv network, and what puts it on the cutting edge?
I would personally say it was the speed in which we built it, the quality of the network, and the resilience of the network. I don't think anywhere else you can find a network that was put together, built, constructed, maintained, and upgraded in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, and you?
I would say, and this might sound a little selfish, but definitely I think the ability of Aliv to kind of put the hopes of the network on younger engineers, right? There's not many places that'll go and find young fledgling people out of college and just say, hey, you're going to be our new engineers in the future, right?
Agreed.
Yeah. So I think that's that, and I think it's that mix of passion with fellow coworkers, where because we have such a passion for everything, we're always trying to find something new, we're always trying to find something better. So we're always looking to the future. We're always looking to see how best we can do it. And we're not just trying to be the best locally, but we're trying to be the best in general.
And you talked about, again, your youth, right? And your value being seen, so much so that you were asked to be a part of this. How did that make you feel?
That made me immensely happy, because normally you hear engineering jobs going out, it's not so much the younger people getting the jobs or the opportunities to show what you can do, and it just brought a huge amount of joy that that we were able to get the opportunity to show what we can do.
Yeah. And I think it shows what really could happen when we mix both sections of experience of wisdom with the youth, because again, we wouldn't have learned anything if people who hadn't had the years of experience hadn't taught us or continuously keep us in the loop. So I think that's where it is. So it empowers you to pass it along to someone else. And I think that's why we're always going to be at the front edge, at the cutting edge, at the forefront of telecoms, because if we continue doing that, they passed it to us, we can pass it to someone else. And because we're still working with people who have that experience, when we hit a wall or something that we've never seen before, we still have those people that go to the, hey, have you seen this before? Have you done this? I think those relationships where we're more than just coworkers. It's almost like having a family at work.
Yeah. Pressure? Would you say that there's pressure on you, especially as young engineers?
I don't think so.
The pressure is on?
I think the pressure would have been at the beginning, because there's all this hope that, hey, you're going to do this. But I think after 4 or 5 years of doing this, it's no pressure right now. It's just you want bigger and better, and you're going to continue just aiming for that.
So you're in the groove. You know what it is that you have to do, and you're excited about what you do.
Yes.
And that excitement coming from first the belief in what you all could do, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what makes then the Aliv network more user friendly? And I imagine, again, as you said, you keep up to date with the latest trends. You're constantly looking at industry information and keeping up with how things are changing. You mentioned about AT&T just announcing that it will do away with its 3G network, right? What makes ours more user friendly?
So I think we're user friendly because we're always engaging the customer, right? When you look at other places, you'd see a billboard when they're advertising something to sell to you. I think we release on Facebook almost daily. We release tips, and we're always engaging with customers because we're always dealing with customers. So when you're in a store, you have someone that's always educated. The customer experience is educated. We're always on social media. In times when there's just not a sale, even if we just say, hey, in order to check your minutes, star 201 pound. Yeah. Because we're doing that, we're ensuring that our users are knowledgeable, and they're also getting the best experience. And they're not afraid to call us, right? Or too annoyed to call us. Like if they're having an issue, they'll call us right away and say, hey, this isn't working. I'm having an issue here. And because of our customer care team, I think they do engage with those customers in such a way that the customer doesn't feel afraid to call back if they're having a slightest issue, right? I've dealt with customers where something like turning on the iPhone, or because it's a new phone to them, they're used to maybe a bubbler, a different type of platform.
Yeah.
So when they're now getting this new phone, the mere fact that you can explain it to them without kind of being condescending. I think that makes a better experience. So we're continuously trying to engage with customers, and that's what we're really trying to balance. Even though we're trying to bring in new technology, we're trying to balance the experience with them so that it's not a case of, here, we have it, come. It's more of a, hey, we're going to take you by the hand, you're going to come along for the ride into the future.
Yeah. CBL Group CEO Franklin Butler had said previously on this show about the changes that both Rev and Aliv have undergone as a result of COVID-19. But I'm curious to know from you all, what do you think about this? Does COVID-19 shift the supply and demand of telecommunications?
Definitely.
Definitely. For instance, when COVID started and they started to have the lockdowns, the first thing we noticed is we had a huge uptick in the amount of data usage and a lot of congestion, where we had a lot of users who would normally spread out and go to work. They're all now home on the internet all day, homeschooling, doing everything.
It's
so
a
now
mobile network.
Yeah. So now we then have to go and do as much work as we can to upgrade the network, to change as many features, add as many features as possible, to get as much speed as we could to the users as fast as possible, so that there's as little lag as possible between getting the level of service that they want to them, and while showing them, like you said, leading them into the connected lifestyle that Franklin always tells us about, that he wants all of the Bahamas to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because like I was saying, when we plan the network is a mobile network, right? So before COVID, you would spend a certain amount of hours at home, a certain amount of hours at work, a certain amount of hours having fun somewhere else. But once COVID hit, everything became stagnant. So you were spending a lot more time in certain areas that maybe had no traffic before, and then certain areas that had traffic during 9 to 5. So downtown, for instance, downtown from 9 to 5 is a busy place with businesses and visitors all day. So we found that during the COVID time, because no one's there, the site isn't using anything. But then Carmichael Road, where someplace where people may leave out during the day to go to work, is now congested all the time.
Yeah.
So we're now having to work around trying to figure out how best we can make a better experience for everyone, right?
Right, meet that capacity.
Exactly.
Right?
And then you have things like people now learning from home.
Right.
They're now using things like MiFi devices from home.
They're working from home. They're doing schooling from home. So
Yes.
parents are working from home 9 to 5. Their kids are also
Exactly.
in school from 9 to 3 or earlier than that in some instances. Yeah, so obviously that would have, or that caused the capacity to be tested, right?
Yeah. And see, that's the thing. We because we're always having these meetings and looking at these performance indicators and having these discussions with senior management, it's always the ability to say, hey, we're noticing a slow uptick. Lockdown started last week, but this week we're noticing that the speed is slowing down. So we're gonna have to put things in this area. And I think that's also the luxury we have by having hands-on senior management, because they're invested in the network as well. So a person like Franklin will tell you, hey, I've noticed this, I've noticed that, we're about to do this. So that's really how we're able to kind of pivot with every little sway or everything.
And the way the network was built allows for that capacity to be expanded.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have licenses in place, so we continuously buy licenses to ensure that we can support whatever changes. We do things like sector splits to ensure that capacity can be increased. So we're always pivoting. The network is never just in one place. It's always fluid.
Yeah.
The towers might be not able to move, but the network itself is always fluid.
Yeah.
It's always the ability
is
to
still moving.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And in cases where we can increase things through software or licenses, then that's the time when we would bring in things like the cell on wheels, or plan another tower to build it in the area in order to make sure that our customers don't feel it, or if they do feel it, they don't feel it very long.
Yeah. Well, lastly, where do you see the Aliv network heading into the future, from your viewpoint?
In my honest opinion, I think the Aliv network is going to grow to be the best network in the Caribbean, and there's nothing there to stop us except just time for us to grow, mature, and to develop as individuals and as a network.
Yeah, I'll take it a step further. I don't think just the Caribbean. I think we would be global on that front, right?
Right.
Because I think we have expertise where some other networks don't have that expertise, right? So we were talking about AT&T and T-Mobile earlier. Things like we've noticed that hurricanes are hitting the U.S. more often. So because we've had experiences with Dorian and stuff like that, we can be able to assist with other networks. I think we're going to go into a place where we expand to the point where we're just alive. It's not something where only Bahamians know about it. Everyone knows about it, right? So I think that's where we're going. We're going to be leaders in technology. We're going to be good. We're going to move on to trying to implement things like 5G and 6G whenever that comes along. To keep up to date. And I think
there's a 6G coming?
There's always it.
That's always the
the
next
G just
generation.
means generation.
Right.
So eventually
Right.
5G.
It's the nature of technology,
exactly,
right?
yes.
It keeps evolving. And
Yeah,
things
because
keep
if we
changing.
really look at it, 10 years ago, right? Well, 12 years ago was the first iPhone.
Right.
And when we used BBM, we thought 5 megabytes a second was fast and we would never
Yeah.
need anything more.
Yeah.
Now we're watching HD videos on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So 10 years from now, when we're out here and living all with our connected suits and, and smart gadgets, house running off of everything, we're
Yeah.
going to need all that technology and that speed for it.
And before we go, describe your experience, or describe what it has been like to be in this experience in one word.
Exhilarating.
Interesting.
All right. Gentlemen, Ricardo, Michael, thank you so much. We really appreciate you guys being here tonight and sharing all of your insight and giving us I think, the real behind the scenes on the way that the network has come about, how it works, and how the network keeps customers top of mind. Thank you. Tonight, our discussion topic was Aliv, the art of engineering. We would like to thank our guests, our very own Aliv engineers, Ricardo Cooper and Michael Trico, for taking the time to be with us. Tune in next Thursday for another discussion on matters that directly affect the lives of Bahamians. Until then, I'm Candino Knowles, filling in for your host, Jerome Sawyer.